So did you know that these three cognitive biases will guarantee you'll waste your potential? But if you remove them, you will unlock a mind so clear that your goals basically achieve themselves. And thankfully, removing them is pretty easy. So let's talk about the first cognitive bias. So imagine that you walked into this frozen yogurt shop and you see this giant board of 300 different options. How on earth are you going to decide what you want? You might be so overwhelmed by the sheer variety in front of you that you wouldn't make a decision at all. And if you get the reference of where I got this example from, let me know in the comments below because it's a pretty great show. This cognitive bias is called choice overload, and it was actually studied in a 2000 study called the Jam Study. The researchers set up two different stalls of jam in a grocery store, one with 24 varieties and one with 6. They wanted to find out which one of these two stalls would generate more sales. The results are pretty interesting. They found out that the stall with the 24 varieties attracted more people to the stall, it had more interest, but the people that looked at stall 2 with the 6 varieties of jam, they were 10 times more likely to make a purchase. And further to this, people who did make a purchase at the 24 variety store reported higher amounts of dissatisfaction with the purchase. And we actually see this in broader life as well. There's a particular episode of the Joe Rogan Experience that I remember quite well. It was one of the episodes where Joe had Jordan Peterson on the podcast. And JP asked Joe, do you want to play a game? Joe says, sure. And JP says to Joe, all right, we can do anything that you want. What do you want to do? And Joe froze. He didn't know what JP meant. And seeing Joe's discomfort or bewilderment, he says, well, exactly. Everyone reacts that way. The optimal number of rules for the game is not 0. Here's another way that you can think about it. Have you ever been on a holiday and you had so much that you could do, but you couldn't decide what you wanted to do, and so you just ended up staying in your room for a little while, scrolling on your phone? I mean, this was me a couple of times when we went to Japan last year. There's a world just right out there with so many options and so many possibilities that it feels like you have none. So you do nothing. In life, we don't have the option to walk into the frozen yogurt store and demand to the store owner to reduce the options on the board, because it doesn't work that way. It's not something that's in our control. But what is in our control is becoming way more decisive than what we are. And there's a really simple way that we can do this, and that's by giving yourself a big goal to achieve or a project that you want to build. Most people think that goals are only these things that you want to achieve, but that isn't the case. They also can serve as filters for your decisions and your choices. So in amongst all these black lines, if there's only one thing that gets you in the direction of your goal, this red line, is the only thing that makes it through the filter. And so your choices automatically are limited. For example, if you had a project of wanting to get really jacked and you walked into that frozen yogurt store with 300 options, you automatically have a criteria to filter all your options from, so that when you look at the board, you really only see a couple or a few options that would be suitable for you that are high protein and low calorie. Everything else you barely see. And if that sounds unrealistic to you, it's because you haven't experienced what it's like to build a project that you care about more than anything else. These type of big goals frame your reality. It becomes a filter that you see the world through. And anything that doesn't get you towards your goal is automatically a distraction that you barely pay any attention to at all. For cognitive bias number 2, I want you to pretend that you're a participant in the Ellsberg paradox, a study conducted in 1961. There's 2 urns here. They're both exactly the same size. In urn 1, you have 50 red balls and 50 black balls. In urn 2, you have 100 red balls and an unknown amount of black balls. Your job as a participant is to choose which urn in round 1 you think is more likely to pull a red ball out. And if you pick an urn and a red ball comes out, you get $100. In round 2, you do the same, but now for a black ball. And what the researchers found is a really interesting result. They found that people statistically favor urn 1 for both red ball and black ball bets. Now, this is a logical paradox because For a red ball bet, you selected earn 1. That means that you believe there are more black balls in earn 2 than red balls. But then for a black ball bet, you also picked earn 1. So now you think that there's more red balls in earn 2 than what there were before. Now, both cannot be true at the same time. And the reason why this happens, the reason why the participants make these decisions is because of a cognitive bias called uncertainty aversion. As the name says, it's a tendency to avoid things that are unclear and uncertain. Uncertainty aversion is a pretty big one for me personally. And I'll give you an example. I'm not a chronic procrastinator, but I do procrastinate sometimes. And in those moments, it's usually because I'm not sure what I need to do. I need to ask myself, what do I need to do now? It's this gap in between one task and another task, and I don't have a clear and structured plan. So rather than sitting down and figuring out the plan, it's really easy for me to default into ease or into comfort or to what's more familiar. And uncertainty aversion is the biggest reason I think why most people don't change their lives. They're in a position where they don't want to be anymore. They think, God damn, man, I need to change my life. But in between where they are and where they want to be is this massive gap of uncertainty and unknown. So they also default to ease, comfort, and what's familiar. So you stay the same and nothing changes. It's like walking into the frozen yogurt shop, but being completely unprepared. You have this project that you want to get absolutely jacked, but you don't know what frozen yogurt options are good for your diet and what isn't. And so you see chocolate and you decide to get chocolate because you always get chocolate. We have this tendency to default to what is familiar. But there's an easy fix. You want to take this amorphous thing of uncertainty and you want to make it crystalline. You want to define it and make it structured. And the way that you turn something amorphous into crystalline, or you bring certainty to the uncertain, is by outlining the project, basically planning. You need to figure out, what do I need to learn? So in the case of our frozen yogurt example, you need to work out what your calorie budget is for the day, how much protein you need, what your macros are. And then you need to figure out what actions you need to do so that when you walk into the frozen yogurt shop, you know exactly what your options are and you can actually make a decision. To do that, you need to track your calories and your macros so that you know what the macros are on the things on the board and also what you can afford in your budget. And then you need to figure out a system so that you can automate it to allow yourself to start thinking about things. So that becomes your new default. Because thinking is the enemy to action. The more you think about something, the less likely you are to actually do it. It needs to become the new default. In this example, it would be making the habit of tracking your macros before you eat anything. There's a quote from Jeff Bezos that I actually quite like, and I think it ties in well here. Stress primarily comes from not taking action over something you have some control over. And the first step is to bring certainty to the uncertain. For cognitive bias number 3, I want you to imagine this scenario. So you walk into the frozen yogurt shop, but this time you know exactly what you want, you know exactly what fits your diet, but you look up at the board and you see this really compelling flavor. You never tried it before, but it looks fucking delicious. And if you're like most people, then you probably decide to treat yourself. You may say something like, it's the weekend, or it's my cheat meal, or I'm on holiday. Whatever bullshit excuse you want to give yourself, it doesn't really matter. What's going on here is hyperbolic discounting. It's a tendency to put more value to things that we can get right now than our goal that's projected out into the future. Basically, what this means is the further our goal is projected out into the future, the less value that we end up assigning to it. And so we would prefer to have something that we can have right now. So you might think you had to exercise this crazy level of willpower, but you don't. Because remember, projects are filters for our actions. Anything that isn't this red line that helps us build the project that we want to build and move us in the direction of our goal that we want to achieve is a distraction. So the solution is focus, not willpower. Let me explain that a bit. Focus requires having clarity on where you're going and why you're going there. It's like taking an epic road trip across the country. You have a very clear destination in mind, and you're only stopping for toilet breaks and to refuel. You also become really clear on how your decisions affects the future. For example, there might be a really cool lookout down here, but it adds so many hours to the journey that's really hard to justify. It's like you walking into that frozen yogurt shop, seeing that very enticing flavor, but then realizing that will set you back a few days and you just can't afford that. So you don't have the option. Now, to be clear, when I say you don't allow yourself to have that option, I'm not saying you're removing that as an option from a willpower perspective. I'm saying that you just don't consider it an option anymore. Like, it's not a possibility. Now, in reality, you can definitely treat yourself to a detour or a tasty flavor. You just need to make sure that you account for it in the project plan so that it becomes a part of the journey rather than a distraction. The main point here is to not discount the value of your goals because they are projected far into the future. If you had a really clear vision, it becomes the most important thing in the world. And anything that doesn't get you towards that goal becomes a distraction that you just don't want anymore. So to summarize everything we talked about in the video, if you want to unlock your full potential, you have to develop focus. This means developing an awareness of where you are and where you want to go. That's your vision of the future that you want to pursue. And then you build projects to achieve that vision, and these become your filters for distractions. You then build systems by rigorous planning and iterations to keep you focused on what you need to do. This brings certainty to the uncertain. That's all for today, my friends. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate you. I send these ideas out in newsletter format every single week, so if you want them delivered directly into your inbox, go check out my Substack. The link is in the description. You can sign up there. Focus is a superpower in the modern world. So if you want to learn how to develop extreme focus and get addicted to it, go watch this video next. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.